Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to J70 Monday number 2, where we're going to talk about tips from your mainsail trimmer. I'm Alan Terhune, joining you from Annapolis, Maryland. Hope everyone is having a great day. Before we get into our presenters and presentation, I want to take a few minutes to remind everyone to support the class we all love and are thrilled to participate in by joining the J70 class if you're not already a member. There's a link on there right now on Yacht Scoring for you to pay your dues. And if you have the opportunity, please make sure you pay your dues. The class needs us now more than ever to keep things up and running in this slow time. And it just shows our solidarity in the fleet we all care about. So there's my little 2-second spiel on that. But as we go forward, as I said, we're going to have J70 Monday talking about mainsail trim. And I'm really thrilled to have two of my colleagues here, two of the best mainsail trimmers in the class. I have Zeke on the line.
Hey, Alan.
Hey, Zeke. And Julio, who's also here.
Ciao, Alan. Ciao, everybody.
Glad to hear from both of you. So before we dive into the presentation, Zeke, if you could just give us a quick recap of what you're doing right now, J70-wise, and what your projects are.
Yeah, sure. Well, I've been very fortunate to get to sail in the J70 class pretty much since the outset. I remember that first Key West race week, there were still a bunch of people sailing with just 3 people in their boat. Now we're going to see Julio and his team sailing around with 5 of their friends in one boat. So it's been pretty cool to be a part of this really fun class, see the growth, and get to race against the best sailors in the world. Most recently, I've been doing a lot of this kind of legs in mainsail trimmer tactician role, and just been kind of really learning a lot about what it takes to make the team go fast, make the boat go fast, trim the sails right. So it's been really fun to be a part of it.
Awesome. And Julio, if you could fill us in a little bit on what you've got going.
Yeah, I started my career in the J70 some years ago in the 2016, if I'm not wrong, as a coach of the Petit Terrible team. It was the year of the San Francisco World Championship. And then I switched, I joined the G Spottino teams as a tactician. So the first role is being as a tactician. And then I choose to switch to the mainsail trimmer role with the Calvi teams. And I find a really good group of friends and great sailors. And since last year, I start sailing again with my old friends of Petit Terrible. So with Claudio Matteo, Michele, and Rossella. We had a great season. I find a great group, and yeah, I'm really proud to work with them and put all my effort to keep, to achieve the goals that we have.
Awesome. Well, as you all can see, we have 2 very experienced top-end mainsail trimmers here, and we're going to get right to it. So Zeke, beginning of the day, you guys are off the dock, you're getting ready to go racing, and like most top teams do, you start pretty much racing from the moment you leave the dock. So well, if you could walk us through what your initial setup is, what you look for from your seat in the house as main trimmer.
Yeah, well, I definitely like to be able to be ready to go as soon as we get out to the racing circle. A lot of times you see teams get out and around the committee boat and then just kind of figure out what they want to do with their rig tune. And they, in my mind, kind of waste a lot of time and opportunity to be practicing. So I like to kind of have the day start right when you leave the dock. You kind of start thinking about what your rig tune settings might be, because all of this mainsail trim stuff that we're talking about really comes from making sure you're confident in your own rig tune, and starting with your tuning guide for sure, but the more you can kind of dial in your specific main and your mast and what you're comfortable with based on all your practice, kind of the better. And I know, Julio, it's something we talked about quite a lot, and you've got a pretty good kind of setup for what you're looking for as you leave the dock with weather forecasts and all that. Are you looking at kind of the same stuff?
Yeah, I as you said, we start racing probably when we wake up, and checking the forecast. And the first thing that I do while I'm on the dock, but especially when I go out and to arrive at the race course, I start to check if the forecast, if the models are confirmed or not. So I try to understand the wind situation. And I'm always in my mainsail, so I start to check if the buttons that I choose is good or not. And then I start to understand which tuning I'm going to use. And yes, Zeke, I think it's really important. Don't lose time, because in these classes you don't have a lot of time to practice. So every minute before the race is really important. So while I'm going to the race course, I'm I'm trying to set the bows and be ready to start with the first lineup.
Yeah, I think that's really huge because as soon as we round the committee boat on the race course, I want to go right into confirming that it looks right. So I'll look up at the main right after we trim in, kind of like just this shot we're seeing here in this photo in the presentation. And then I'm very visual, so I like to kind of go through a checklist of things I look at specifically on the main to make sure I'm in the right ballpark. And I kind of start with those the overbend wrinkles or the speed wrinkles that you can kind of see down towards the bottom of the main at the luff. And the very bottom one, just in the picture that kind of comes back into the window on the mainsail, I like to see that just to that middle or the back of the mainsail. And that kind of makes, that's the first check to make sure that I've got the rig tune in the right ballpark. And then I can kind of work my way up and look at that sort of right near that J70 logo, that number 3 batten, and just make sure it's not too deep or too flat, and that confirms I got the right battens. I've got enough bend up there. You can see in this photo it's pretty flat, but I think that's a good look for a lot of conditions. And that that gets me right where I need to be, and can kind of check the head stay sag as a part of that as well. But I think we were talking, Julia, you've got some other visuals you check on as well to make sure you're in the right rig tune before you get racing, right?
Yeah, we do more or less. We are on the same page, I can say. And when I check the first part of the lineup, I'm going to check my mainsail, and I look especially the area between the J70 logo and the sail number. Then I use the 2 leech telltales, and I think that are really useful to understand the twist. And as you said, it's really important, in my opinion, the triangle between the mast and the boom, to understand if the bend of your mast is correct, to understand if the bottom part of the mainsail, the dip, is good or not, and for example, the amount of backstay and of bang that you are using is good, or you have to change something. Sometimes you are speaking about fine tuning. So every time, I don't know you, but every time I try to adjust just half turn, 1 turn, but to adjust my tuning to the weather condition.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, and I think all that is really important to look at and get it all set up. So both of you now have talked about what you look for, but now I think the next question is how do you get there, and what controls you have available to you to make this happen. So, Zeke, when you're looking at this, what are the options you have, and how do you like to use those controls to make these adjustments?
Yeah, well, it's kind of a really reason why I really love sailing the J70 class. You get to pull on a lot of strings as the mainsail trimmer. You're kind of sitting there and your legs in. You've got access to the main sheet, the traveler, the backstay, the vang. You can kind of bark about the Cunningham, the jib halyard, all the jib sheets. So there's a lot going on for sure, and it's really imperative to know what to adjust first. And for me, it's the most important thing is the main sheet. There's no question about it. It's the biggest impactor of the boat balance and how much power is in the boat and all that. And it's just so imperative to be adjusting it all the time. I can, sometimes I can remember seeing guys going upwind and I look at the main trimmer and the main sheet's in the cleat and the ropes on the ground. And I just don't understand how those guys can get upwind without adjusting the main sheet a ton. So the main sheet's in my hand, constantly going in and out. And the next thing that I adjust the most would be the backstay, I think, for sure. It's, and it's just such a big control over everything. It's kind of controls both the jib and the main. I like being able to pull backstay on because it really flattens out the whole profile of the sails and kind of creates less drag as you go through the puffs and the lulls. So it's just such a big impactor. And the traveler, I don't adjust as much. I try to look at the traveler as sort of a gross tune or a base tune, unless it's kind of moderate breeze and really puffy. I don't adjust it that much. I try to get it in the right ballpark and then adjust the main sheet and the backstay more. In fact, I think I probably adjust the vang even more so than I do the traveler in a perfect world. So that's kind of the order that I adjust things. Julia, I know we have a couple different opinions on the vang maybe, but would you agree on the main sheet and the backstay?
Yeah, I totally agree, and about the main sheet and the backstays, and I can say that what I love about to cover the mainsail trimmer role is that you have to be really active during all the race. You can't stop and take a rest. You have always to work to make the boat fast. And yeah, probably the reason in my background, I'm a 470 sailor, so I love play with the mainsail sheet. So first of all, the controls that I use more is the main sheet. I really work during all the regatta with the Mainsail sheet, and I can say that I could happen that during an upwind I never put it in the cleat. So I totally agree with you. And the second two controls are the backstays and the main traveler. I can say both, but yeah, probably a little bit more the backstay compared to the main traveler as a frequency to use it. And after that, there is the Vang, then I can say the Houghton, and then the Cunningham. So this is more or less my approach and the way that I use the controls. I have a sign on my main sheet, so I have a mark, and I can say that I have marks more or less everywhere on the boat. So I try to have the marks on the main sheet, I have the marks on the bank, I have the marks on the auto. I think that are really helpful. And I'm not saying that while I'm sailing, I'm looking where I am with the mark of my main sheet, okay? But I think that could be a good reference also to understand the difference between, the flat water condition or the wavy one, and could be an help have all these marks in the tough moment, in the crucial moment of the regattas, like just to accelerate after the start or while you are around in the mark. And I think that in this moment, it could be an help, and I love put a lot of marks on my boat. I don't know, Zeke, what
Julia,
do you think?
yeah, Julia, you sounded defensive right off the bat on the main sheet. Like, I'm going to just attack you on your main sheet, Mark, and I'm definitely going to do that. I sometimes get in trouble with my teams because I'm like you, Julia. I like to have everything marked on the boat so that you can adjust the jib sheet and say, put the jib sheet to 6, or put the, bring the Cunningham down to 4. And then they look back and they're like, your main sheet is just a rope with nothing on it. And yeah, that's true. For me, I've used the mark on the main sheet, and it's a good reference, but for me, it's just a little distracting. I just think the main sheet is moving so much of the time, so often, as you said, it's never in the cleat. And I just kind of become comfortable with the visual checks in my head that I look here, then I look here, starting with the jib telltales, and then the bottom part of the main and the leech of the main. I know what to check and kind of what I want it to look like. And I think there's just so much variability in how the height of the boom might change sometimes, depending on your rig setting, that mark on the main sheet, it just kind of distracts me a little bit and can give me what's not perfect information. But generally, I like the idea of having repeatable settings, and everything else is marked on the boat. That's just my personal style. I don't like the main sheet mark.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That both of you have different styles of doing it, but I think that's what's really cool is both of you are very successful in being main trimmers on these boats, and both of you do it differently but have really good results. I think it's a good thing to show that there's not one way to do it, and that everyone kind of operates differently and gets good results. So I think it's important to know. But in moving forward here, so you guys are getting ready for the race day. It's a light air race day. We got 2 boats here, light air. I'd love to hear, Zeke talk about what he thinks about light to moderate air. And as it gets windier, we'll talk about it more. You're setting the sail up, just some clues you're looking for and tricks to the boat as you're doing it.
Yeah, I think when it's light air, the key is getting enough power out of your sails that you're able to pressurize the weather rail. By that, I mean getting bodies to windward. Nothing changes to depower sails or flatten sails until you're able to get body weight up on the weather rail and flatten the boat out. And that translates that pressure into the keel, and we're starting to get some flow over the keel, and the boat can really start moving. So when bodies are in, I'm thinking about getting the most power for sure. And again, starting with your rig tune and being confident in your rig tune and your jib leads and all that is step 1. But once we're setting up the main, for sure, I go traveler all the way up to the top of the bar. And we get that question sometimes, is it okay to have the boom a little bit to weather? And I think yes. I think the answer is yeah. The traveler can be all the way at the top. It seems to not really slow the boat down very much because it's putting power and putting return into the bottom part of the main, so that the top part of the main can be pretty twisted open. Like that picture on the right, the main's a little bit more twisted open, and that's going to let the boat really accelerate. So, and I try to, a good visual for me, when the traveler is so high up, when it's all the way up like that, you have to think about the main sheet now is doing two things. One, it's bringing the boom up to weather, and then it's pulling the boom down. And it's only when you start pulling the boom down that it's going to close the leach. And I actually use that as a good visual clue of kind of when to stop pulling the main sheet in when the traveler is in this all the way up position. Traveler all the way up, and then pull enough main sheet on that the boom's coming up at you to weather. And as soon as it starts getting pulled down, that's a good sign that you're starting to close the leach, which probably isn't great. But Julia, do you pull your traveler all the way to the top, or are you the boom centerline kind of guy?
Yeah, I think that you say one thing is really important. I think in the light wind condition, you need power, because one of your goals is to have the crew as soon as possible on the rail. So you're looking for power, you're looking for speed. And the way to have it, I think is, okay, I sail with the main traveler all the way up. I have no backstay. I'm managing the twist of the sails, as you said, with the mainsail sheet. And let me add that in this case, in the light wind condition, I think it's really, really important. Okay, it's not just a main trimmer job, but is the job of the main trimmer speak a lot with the jib trimmer also, to have the speed and to accelerate. So I think that you have to be really active with the jib trim in this condition. And to jump into the role of the mainsail trimmer is not just a matter of trim the sails, but it's just a matter also to manage the crew. So press the boat every time that the puff is coming, try to accelerate. I think that these are the keys for a good speed in light wind. And yes, the twist is your friend in this condition. No? So I think that you have to be really careful to manage the right twist on the mainsail. And I think that we can analyze the difference in these two pictures. On the picture on the left is the wind is really light, while on the right, maybe there are a couple of knots more. And probably we are seeing the crossover when you need just the twist to accelerate, and when you start to close a little bit, probably in the picture on the right, you can close just a little bit more the main. You are starting to use more just to point at 10% of the backstay, so to have more return also, and you have to rebalance a little bit, the mix between the backstay and the mainsail sheet and the main traveler. What do you think? You agree on that?
Yeah, well, I think I definitely do agree. I think you're hitting on the right points. I'm curious about how you brought up the backstay, which is a really good thing to talk about right now, and making sure that it can be loose enough, I think, in the light air, so that it's not only about the mainsail shape, but it's about the headstay sag. And it's really important in light air to be able to get enough headstay sag that the jib can be powered up, and ultimately it helps the boat point once the boat's powered up. But so what do you look for on your backstay gross adjustment in the light stuff to make sure that it's overall set up loose enough when it's light like this?
Yeah, I think that the gross backstay is a really important topics in our role, and especially in the J70, So we can discuss about the light wind, the medium, and the strong in a different way. I think that most important things, however, when I wait, just to give you a feedback, I wait until the starting procedure to adjust it, because I want to really be sure to have all the information about the wind until the last moment. So in the light air condition, I'm speaking about the condition on the left picture. I want to be sure to have the maximum backstay ease, and I'm not going to use it probably during this condition. At the same time, I know that if the wind starts to increase, I need to work a little bit on the backstay. So I need to adjust it and find a compromise between the condition. At the same time, I think that it's, then we are going to say with more wind, and then another thing is the strong wind condition. So in light wind, we are checking to have enough headstay sag, so you want all the headstay sag possible. And on the totally other side, in strong wind, you need to play hard with the backstay, and you have to be comfortable to play with it. So the gross, I think the trim of the gross backstay is really important, and you have to be careful before the start.
Yeah, I think that's totally right. And we'll talk about the heavy air backstay gross for a second. But again, getting back to me, I'm just I'm visual. I like to kind of have things to check off on the visual front, and the blocks on the backstay that hang, underneath the ferrule. I think that's the gauge that I use in the light air to make sure that the gross is loose enough. Is if those blocks are hanging down, 8 inches or even a foot, then I know that it's maximum loose. And I still have enough play to kind of snug some tension on if some waves are coming or something. But I make sure that's eased enough. So if the backstay is too tight, those blocks are going to sit all the way at the top of the split right underneath the ferrule.
Yeah.
And that's a sign that you're pulling backstay on at that point. So you need to loosen the gross enough in the light air so that the blocks will hang 10 inches down or so. And if we move on, I think, to some heavier air setup in the next slide, we're able to see how important it is to pull the backstay on tight. And for me, like I think that this is the most, if you look across the board, this is where a lot of teams have a huge opportunity to improve their heavy air sailing, is by getting the backstay gross tune tight enough. And do you have a fancy way of adjusting the backstay gross, or do you have just knots and half hitches like me?
Yeah, I just have knots, and I can say that I before the start to try to use the body, the feet, everything to trim hard before the start, because then it's important that you feel comfortable. You can't fight during the upwind and strong wind to trim more backstay. This is my opinion. Then of course it's different if it's a classic strong wind condition. You have to trim hard the gross backstay, but be careful if the wind drop.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you may have sort of chopped up a little bit there in the beginning of that talk, Giulio, but I think we were laughing before about how hard we work to get that backstay on the gross tune as hard as we can. And I've seen a lot of really cool adjustable setups on the dock that leave me very envious at times, but I keep coming back to a rope that goes up through the ferrule, and you can just pull as much down as you can and put some slip knots in it. Because boy, if it's blowing 20, 25 knots, I get 2 guys back there and we hang on the backstay to the point where we get the ferrule all the way down to the corner of the transom, so we can't pull it any tighter.
Yeah.
And for sure that's helping to pull enough backstay on. But what I like about it is it's making it easier to adjust. It's not just about getting it all the way to max tight, but it's about then being able to ease it off 10% and pull it back on. The more you have on the gross tune, the easier it is to adjust the fine tune. And I'm just not that strong, or I don't like to work that hard or something, but the easiest I can have it is just the boat's going to go faster. And of course you need to be in conditions where you're not going to need to blow the backstay, but if you're certain that you're in max backstay conditions, I'd say whale on it as hard as you can.
So in looking at these photos, in the first set, we were talking about when the boat needs power, right? And what you guys look at to get the boat power. Now, obviously we're talking about when it's windy, and the boat needs less power. The boat doesn't seem to have a sweet spot where it's perfect. It's either underpowered or overpowered, right? And here's a bunch of photos where they're overpowered. So when you guys are the main trimmer and you're in overpowering conditions, what are a few things you do to keep the boat on its feet? In both of these photos, it's pretty windy, but if you notice, the main isn't luffing, and that's because it's trimmed properly. So, maybe Giulio, I think you're probably in a few of these photos here. What are a couple of clues that you look at to keep the main trimmed properly when the boat is overpowered?
Yeah, I still remember the moment of these photos on the left. We were last year on guard, and the practice days before the European Championship is quite windy. It's 18 to 20 knots, and of course you have to choose the right tuning set. And then speaking about the controls, as we discussed before, the backstay can help you a lot. And so I try to choose the right rig tune, thinking about to go to sail the regatta with more or less the 70-80% of the backstay on. And I think that this could be a good way to understand if you have the right tuning. Say that, then I use, of course, if you see the picture on the left is windy and flat water condition. So the goal was to sail with a quite flat profile and maybe a little bit closer compared to the standard. And as I said before, I love playing a lot with the mainsheet. So I sail with the main traver more or less close to the middle, maybe some centimeters on windward. In this case, I was like 10 centimeters more on the middle. I remember this tuning test. We were sailing with Enfant Terrible on leeward on us, so I was sailing with a little bit more mainsail travel. And in other, I think that in this case we have to control also the Cunningham. Remember that when you are close to finish your backstay, so the falls start to appear on the mainsail, you can trim a little bit more the Cunningham, and you can add some more backstay. So this could be a really good tools to use. Another things. Look in this picture is about the combination between the mainsail and the jib trim. In this moment, I think that it's really, really important, the communication between the mainsail trimmer and the jib trimmer. And I'm speaking about the Hinauler sheet. Hinad, what else? We didn't discuss about the buttons, but of course, comparing the photos of the light wind and compared to this one, we change also the buttons, so here we are sailing with the 10-230, and probably in the picture before, the teams were sailing with the soft one. In other, just to, and then I give, it's a Zeke turn to speak about the picture, but just to, I think that could be interesting, analyze these two pictures, because the weights, the weights are different, I think that is a classic flat water spot on the left with the Peller wind, and there is a choppy condition on the right. Your goal is a little bit different, I think that on the right you need more power for profile and a little bit more open, and you have to think about the average of the speed. You have to be focused on the choppy that are coming, and really be focused on the average speed of the boat. And what do you think, Zeke? What do you want to add?
Yeah, well, I think you said a lot of really, really good stuff, but a couple points that you made that I like to kind of come away with were, putting the traveler you mentioned was not all the way in the middle, but sort of, I think of it in terms of car lengths, so lengths of the car as it slides up the traveler. And I'm on the same page with you there. I generally like to leave it one car length up from the center when you're in this maximum windy condition and you're trying to depower. And one of the reasons I think that works pretty good is it allows you to actually pull the jib in a little harder, or maybe carry some more in-hauler up the range of conditions. And I think that can be good, because if the traveler goes any lower, then you get more return from the jib into the bottom of the main, and it starts to blow up or kind of bubble and luff a little bit more. And I also really liked what you said about how you use the Cunningham to sort of control the folds, you called them, or the wrinkles as we refer to them here, the overbend wrinkles that you start to get. Because again, for me, it comes down to the visual on what I see on the mainsail. And when you start pulling the backstay really, really hard, you start getting those inversion wrinkles where the sail literally, as you said, starts folding and getting flat and sort of inverting. And by pulling the Cunningham on, you're able to put the shape back in the sail where you want it. So having that right combination of enough backstay on and enough Cunningham on to keep the sail looking smooth, that's the difference between the boats that go upwind with their sail flapping and the boats that can have it just kind of catching. And, you just sort of use the main sheet going in and out to sort of catch the sail, keep it full, and use it as like a lever to keep the boat flat and try to drive on as steady a heel angle as you can.
I think this is all really huge points on sailing when it's windy. I know that's one of the things that's really difficult for people. So we got a question from Brian Keene, who's watching this right now, for both of you actually, in asking how you guys adjust and trim the vang in these conditions. As it's obviously a crucial control when it's windy, and I'd be curious to hear if Giulio, if you want to jump in first, how you decide how much vang to put on, and what you look at to make those adjustments.
Okay, first of all, I think that is another good matter to speak about the role on board. And for example, I don't know Zeke, but during the upwind, Michele, the tactician, is the crew involved in to trim the vang. So the discussion is between me and him about the amount of vang to use. And in this condition, for example, on the left, we were totally vang on, so 100%. the Vang.
You mean, does that mean, Giulio, does that mean 100% as hard as they can pull it, as
Exactly.
they cannot pull it any
Exactly.
harder? Interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. This is the picture on the left. And personally, I like, because in this way I can play more with the main sheet, and I have more the control of the leech. If we can, we have some picture in the PPT, and I think that if you are, if the wind increase during the race, you are not tuning for that. I think that you have to be careful, because you can start trimming the bank, but then the end you have to ease again a little bit the bank, because it's not, you are going to bend also too much the mast in the bottom part, and you are going to lose totally the mainsail. So the mainsail start to flap, become really nervous, and this is not what you want. You want always, in my opinion, in the strong wind condition, now the main is not flapping, but could happen. And I think that it's important that not start to flap really nervous, but a kind of, I have to manage it a little bit. So you can have the backwind on the main, you can lose sometimes the main, but have to be really, really controlled.
It's interesting, Julia, we're gonna have to do some more racing against each other and figure out which one of us is faster upwind in this breeze. Because the thought of pulling on the Vang 100% of how much I can pull scares the daylights out of me. I think you get to a point with a deck stepped mast like this where it starts impacting the head state tension a bit, and you're just kind of over bending the bottom like you were talking about, and actually maybe even losing some head state tension. And I just don't think it's the best tool to be trying to invert the main. I guess I feel like if I pull it that hard, the bottom of the main is going to be up to windward, it's going to be totally gone. And I sort of like the idea of having a little bit more shape down low. I mean, I think you would definitely want it flat, but I don't think fully inverted there, and then keep some power and some leech control. So I just pull it on for sure. As soon as we're in overpowered condition, I take the slack out, so I'm able to ease the main sheet without losing the leech. And I'll go another few inches from there. And actually I pull it myself, because we sail 4 people and the 2 people in front of me are legs out. And I'll just reach forward and pull the Vang back myself. But I pull some tension on it. But I basically, as soon as I start seeing the big overbend wrinkles in the bottom of the main as a result of the Vang getting tight, that's when I'll stop. But I don't know. I used to pull it harder, and I kind of try to adapt. So it's interesting to hear you talk about that. Maybe I need to try that.
No, I think that it's, as you said. Sorry, I lost you for a second, guys. I'm here again. I think that it's really interesting to see the difference between, the way to sail the boat, and I think that it's also why the J70 is a great.
Did we lose? We might have lost Giulio for a second there.
As you've seen in the, I'm here again.
Yeah.
We are in direct, so could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no, I was saying that it's interesting to see the differences between, the way to sail the boat. And this is why I think that J70 is the boat great to sail and compete. And in the photos, what I can say is that the bottom part of, however, of the mainsail was quite good, with the
that's
shape.
true.
So,
that's true.
No, so I think that we were sailing with all the Vang on, but with the shape in the bottom. That I totally agree. You need it to sail in the strong wind condition, because if not, you don't have nothing on the rudder. So it's difficult. It's really difficult to helm the boat.
Well, and it's also not for nothing, but it's different.
I think
I was going to say it's different. It's a little different where you're pulling the Vang from. If it's your forward person, they probably can't physically pull as much as a person that's in the back of the boat pulling 100%. So maybe that's where we have a little bit of difference as well.
Maybe, but Michele is, he's sailing the fin
probably
class.
Stronger than me.
Okay. We'll see. Next time I introduce you to Michele, we'll see.
I feel safe across the Atlantic Ocean from,
But I think that we are going to do another webinar more about the sail design and the tuning, because if not, we can stay to discuss about the Vang and the bottom part of the main for all the night, I think. But of course, the lower is the key, probably.
Right. Yep.
The amount of lower that you need.
Yeah.
And the crew weight, but it's another page again, and it
Whole-
became too long.
It's a whole other thing, and it could also just be your outhaul tension too, right? I
Right.
mean, depending on how much you need.
Yeah.
But so in thinking about this, you know, obviously the main trimmer, the primary job is to trim the sail, right? But also, you know, when you're trimming the main, you have other roles on the boat. And here's a good photo of Zeke sailing with John Heaton in Miami at the Midwinters, and they had a really great regatta. And you know, the main trimmer has to interact with, you know, the whole team, but especially the jib trimmer and the helmsman. So I think this would be a good time for Zeke maybe to start talking about some of the things that he chats about with the jib trimmer and the driver, and we can go through in different conditions what discussions you both have with different members of the crew. So I don't know, Zeke, if you want to jump in and
well,
yeah,
for sure. It's definitely a really reason that the main trimmer position is so fun. I mean, my most favorite thing about it is I get to keep my legs inside so my feet don't get wet. That's the number one reason I like trimming main. But you get to be so involved with the whole team dynamic. You're kind of, you know, you're driving the bus in terms of, you know, a lot of times where you're going, but also just the communication between the helmsman and the forward crew and yourself. And you also get to be involved in the jib trim. And I think it's really important that the main trimmer is involved in the jib trim. And, you know, kind of like we talked about at the beginning, where the big picture stuff starts with the rig tune. For the jib trim, it really starts with, you know, having good marks. So we definitely have a ton of marks on the boat for the jib sheet, the in-hauler. And so we've built a bit of a matrix there so that we know where the kind of starting point is. And generally we'll get the jib trimmer to get the sheets to the starting point. And then, you know, he'll check it out and make sure that, you know, they like what they're seeing. And then I'll jump down and check it out and make sure that I kind of like it and that it's setting up this, you know, to accomplish the same goal that I'm trying to accomplish with the main. And I just think it's really important to then communicate if you're going to make a change. You know, I might say I'm going to ease the lure a half a number and pull the in-hauler in a half a number from where you were, and let's just see how we go. And, you know, from their position, the jib trimmer is looking out and kind of giving the relatives of how we're going. So after I'll make a change, and I'll physically do it, I'll reach forward and do it a lot of the time so they can stay hiking or wherever they're supposed to be. And then we'll make that change and they'll be able to say, yeah, that was, you know, we're higher, but we're losing it here and we need to put the bow down a little bit. So definitely being involved with the jib trimmer and having that discussion is really an important role for the main trimmer.
Yeah, and you know, Julio, I'd love to have you jump in here, you know, in talking about how you interact with the driver and your jib trimmer, frankly. But here's some photos, light air, right? The discussion's different with each person on the boat depending on the wind range. So let's just talk about with both of you, but we'll have Julio kick it off with, what are you guys talking about from your seat in the house of main trimmer in light winds, and how would that discussion go?
You know, I jump a little in the discussion about the communication on board. And as Zeke said, I think that the main trimmer role, of course, is based on to trimming the mainsail, but thinking about the communication on board, I think that it's really, really important, because, and this is why I years to sail with Calvi and Petit Terrible as a main trimmer, because I was really linked with all the other guys in the team, and especially, for example, with the tactician. I have a really good relationship with Michele Pauletti that I really admire as a sailor and as a man. But I'm saying that because I think if you have to consider, in my opinion, that the mainsail trimmer is exactly in the middle between the helmsman and the rest of the team. So you have to communicate, of course, during all the regatta, giving the support to the helmsman, but at the same time you have to be ready to speak with the jib trimmer, with the gennaker trimmer, and be ready. You know, sometimes the tactician could ask some feedbacks, some information and advice about, you know, or reconfirm about the situation. So I think that he needs to be focused 100% on the speed of the boats, but have always under control the big picture on what is going on in the race. And at the same time, always speaking about
we got to get better internet
about
over
the
there.
Communication, also to, you know, to push the. Sorry.
We lost you again for a second there. So.
Okay, sorry. I was where you arrived. Sorry, Zeke.
No, that's all right. You were kind of starting to talk about the communication to the helmsman specifically in the light air stuff, and kind of I think the kind of the.
Yeah,
I was
yeah. No,
curious. I was
I
going to
was.
ask you what your specific language is. I know you're kind of direct and you like to limit the phrases that come out of your mouth. So what
Yeah,
kind of words
yeah.
do you say?
Let me say that with Claudia is a start to have a really good career in the J70.
Mm-hmm.
So she's a good driver, and she have start to have some trophies, you know, and so she know how to say the most of the situation. So what I suggest, however, about the communication is that to be really simple, short, and constant during the race. So, you know, I think that you can use something like up one, down one, or press the boat, or not to lower. So something like this. Then what we had with Claudia is give a support with, you know, some words like set of waves is coming, press a little, or something like flat water, you can point a little bit more. And we work also on the VMG. So fast VMG, high VMG, and or if you know the average speed, if we are going to say in the turbulent area. Yeah. So I think that we had something about the standard communication that I really suggest that to be really simple and clear. Speaking about the light wind, so sorry, Alan, if I spoke a little also about the communication, and
you're
I
great.
was out of the topics of the picture, but in this picture, I think that is interesting. So in the first picture, there is a, you know, I'm trimming the mainsail and the backstay in the same times, you know, and is interesting because we said in the first part of the webinar, you know, Zeke, that we are always playing with the.
Oh, I think we lost him here again.
Controls and try to reset it. Sorry, do you hear me?
Yeah, you're going a little bit in and out, but
yeah. So I play with the mainsail sheet and the backstays in the same times. About the communication, I think that the mainsail role the mainsail trimmer have to imagine to steer the boat. So I'm looking forward and looking the details, and in the same times I'm giving the feedbacks to Claudia. Here, Michele is also trimming the jib. So it's always a balance between the jib trim and the mainsail trim. Looking the picture number 2, I think that is interesting because I'm going in. No, so we discussed that in the light wind condition, the most active role probably is the main trimmer. So you can jump in, you can go totally forward, close to the cabin, you can jump back again, you can start hiking with the other guys of the crew in front of the winch. So you have to be really active, and do that. You have to speak with Claudia because, for example, with the Hesman, because, for example, it could be a drop, you know, of the wind, and you can just jump in, and the Hesman can go straight. This is a kind of communication that you can have. The last picture, again, I'm trimming the mainsail in the same time the jib trimmer is trimming the jib. So what I want to say is that it's really, really important, the balance between the main and the jib, and use the jib every time to accelerate. This is my feedback. I hope that that I don't lose the connection this time. No, but if not, I'm going to send an email to everybody.
Yeah. But I think this is also a good time, you know, for Zeke to jump in here and just, you know, he's generally very quick in light air. You know, just a couple of things that he's focusing on and working with the driver, you know, to make sure that happens.
Yeah, there are some cool things, Julia, that you said for sure, like pulling the backstay and the main at the same time. You know, that's really important that when you pull the backstay on or ease the backstay, it has a really big impact on the leach. But I like what you said about communicating with the helmsman and using repeatable language, using the same words every time. Like you shouldn't say press one time and then say bear off another time. You should just limit the amount of words that can mean the same thing, just to simplify everything and make it really repeatable. And don't forget to, and you actually mentioned this before and I loved it, don't forget to like just say positive stuff every now and then. Like the drivers in this fleet are so focused and so dialed in. They're just staring at these yarns on a white triangle for hours on end. And for them to hear, hey, we're going really well, is like, that can be the difference between, you know, a good race and a bad race. So it's a good opportunity to just do that. And the last thing, I'm glad you brought up the body weight position and how active you are. I think in the light air, it's really important to focus on getting the body weight forward. And you guys have an extra person as far as I can tell, but you can hardly tell because you're so smushed up together and forward.
Yeah.
And what I like in that picture number 2 is how low you're able to get. I think oftentimes people forget that getting your bodies up out of the sky and pressed down low on the boat is really good for, you know, keeping the weight low to the boat is good, but also keeping your body, your shoulders out of the air is actually, it makes a really big difference on the drag in the air. So weight forward and weight low, I think, is really important. That's what I'm thinking about for the light stuff. And it's all in an effort to get the keel working again. Like in all these photos, you guys are up on the rail, but when it's even lighter than this, I'll give the helmsman a specific goal to steer the boat to in terms of the telltale angle. I'll say it like, you know, if the weather telltale is ever straight back, you're too high. It should always be nervous. I'll describe it as nervous, where you're always keeping pressure on the jib, trying to power the boat up as much as you can so that you can eventually get weight to the rail, and then you can think about sailing upwind a little bit more.
Yeah,
Yes,
Zeke,
let me add just one thing that I really agree with you that you have to be positive, you know, never give up, always pushing, and this is your role, I think. And let me say that another good communication is, and then that I use a lot while we are sailing, the good angle, because sometimes you know, you just say up one or down one, but the risk is to start to have a pendulum.
Yeah.
So it's really important also sometimes say good angle, go straight, good angle, and this is I think really important to stay in the mood.
Right, or good but no lower, good but no higher. Yeah, I like that.
That it means everything is going good.
Right.
Yeah, I just want to thank both of you for getting me in trouble. Josh, the guy I sailed with all winter, saying, you know, I should take notes from you guys about how to be more positive in light air. So I really, really appreciate both of you.
Don't just think about for light air, Alan. Think about that for life.
Well,
just
no,
be
but
positive. Just
true. I agree. But I think the one thing that's important too in light air to remember, and I you know, think about, you know, when I used to own a boat and steer, is the boat has really horrible feel in light air. So it's really easy for the boat to wander, and kind of helping, you know, whoever's driving not to over trim the main to give it feel, but kind of, I don't want to say sympathize with their lack of feel on the rudder and light air is something that is pretty important for the main sheet trimmer to do, I think. So kind of going forward here, you know, now it's getting a little breezier. Everyone's out on the rail hiking. We're not maybe at full windy conditions yet, but it's, you know, the boat's pressured up and now you're sailing. So what are some of the communications you make, and, you know, some of the different discussions that you might have in this breeze versus, you know, really light air? So I don't know, Zeke, what would be some of the differences you see?
There's not a lot of like wildly different approaches. I mean, I'm still very visual and still want to get everything set up so it looks right based on my tuning guide and all that. And, you know, generally here you've got the weight up and you're starting to think about a specific heel angle. I think a lot of teams in this condition, you start kind of wanting, as you were saying, Alan, you want a little more feel to just feel better in this sort of, you know, moderate breeze. And a lot of teams sail around with too much leeward heel as a result of that. So I definitely, this is where I start to really focus on a specific heel angle, and I recommend an indicator if you don't have one, but there's a lot of good electronics out there that'll tell you the heel of your boat. And then you can give a target to not only the helmsman, but the crew as well. Because I know when I would do legs out positions on the J70, I'm so guilty of leaning in because I get nervous and I want to heel the boat to leeward and have it feel a little bit better, but it's just so bad. So having a heel angle target, I think, is really, really good. And, you know, this is where you kind of start making decisions on how the wind relates to the waves a bit, because you can kind of make decisions on, do I want more power or less power? So, you know, sailing in 11 knots and dead flat water is very different than sailing in 11 knots and, you know, washing machine lake conditions in Chicago or something like that. So you can kind of start adding in, well, it's 11 knots, but it's so lumpy, we're going to stay a little looser on the rig, or I'm going to sail with a little more traveler up and a little more twist for, you know, to get power that way. So it starts to become quite dynamic in this condition. There's a lot more to think about, but what do you think about that, Julia? What's your go-to move for this moderate stuff?
Yeah, probably is the most dynamic situation, you know, is the situation where you have to adjust more the main traveler, the backstay, and the main sheet and the van. You have to adjust everything all the time, no? Because it depends if the wave is coming, if it's flat water, if a puff is coming. And I think that are probably the most difficult situation. Let me say that I use the mark on the main sheet, but we are not using the heeling angle. So
there you go.
It's 1-to-1, you know, Zeke. And my heeling angle are the Matteo's legs, as you can see in the.
Well, then it depends how cold the water is, because he's not going to put his feet down there, right?
Yes, could be. No, but let me say that in this condition, I think that it's also difficult because you can change. You can sail with two different VMG, so you can sail a little bit higher, maybe a little bit more heeled, and you can sail with the VMG, with the fast VMG, so with the boat a little bit flatter and going for speed. So it's really the crossover between these two VMG. In these three picture, I think that is interesting. There are three different situations, and that change for the communication.
You hearing him, Alan?
The first one is for the World Championship. Sorry,
that's okay.
I'm here.
You were just starting to talk about the first picture, I think.
Okay, so you don't lose a lot.
Yeah.
So we were in Turkey sailing the World Championship, and this was the situation where the communication with Claudia was if the set of waves was coming, and I was asking to press more the boat, you know. So this is the kind of communication that we were doing, and as you can see, I have the mainsail sheet in my hands, and I'm trying to control the heeling and the power of the boat, especially with the mainsail sheet. In the picture number 2 is the situation where there is the turbulent wind, and I'm going to ask to Claudia take an average angle, you know. So don't try to sail with a peak of speed, but be careful on the average speed. That is really important. And here we are.
Oh, we might have lost.
We were in my 2 sails. Where you arrived?
We're arrived here. Well, something that you just said before we lost you, Giulio, was talking about the average speed and not necessarily looking for the super high speed.
So work on the average speed if the wind is turbulent, and this were the case. We were on Garda sailing close to the rocks in Malcesine. And the third picture is again in Malcesine, and it was another situation where the mainsail trimmer have to work with the helmsman to choose the lead-out tack. So it's another crucial moment where the communication is really important. And after a lead-out tack, you have, I think, to be really focused, because you can sail immediately higher, no, because you want to kill the boat on windward you, but you have to, however, keep the speed and work with the helmets to manage the situation.
Yeah, I think we gotta. That's a really good, really excellent point. I know we gotta move on to the windier stuff, but one thing that I like Giulio said that's really important, I thought, was managing your lanes becomes really important in that moderate stuff. So he was just talking about where to tack. But keep in mind that through all these different modes you can sail in that condition, all the other boats might not be in the same mode that you're in. So picking a good lane so that you can sail in your mode is really important, because there's nothing worse than setting up in a spot you think you can live, but you got somebody to lure who's sailing heeled over and really high for a short period of time.
So we actually have a good segue here. We just got a question for someone, and I think it's appropriate for these windy photos. And what they're asking is, in the puffs, what is your first choice? Do you dump the main sheet first? Do you max backstay first? Do you dump the traveler? Is it a combination of things? So, the question really is, when the big puffs come and it's really windy and you're trying to keep the boat on its feet, what is your go-to move and what do you do first? So I don't know if Zeke, if you want to jump in on that, what would be your first go-to move?
I think it comes back to me, just like I said at the very beginning, the main sheet is the most direct impact, right? If you drop the main sheet, the boat's going to come to flat. So the main sheet getting eased is really key. You just have to be prepared, right? So if it's that big of a puff that you need to dump quickly, the vang is at least snugged or pulled somewhere between 0 and 100% of a fin sailor's strength. But the Vang needs to be on so that you can do that big dump. And, hopefully also the Traveler is in a low enough position that it doesn't have to get really dumped. So I'm imagining we're talking about this in the sort of 14 to 18 range where the Traveler is already close to the center. But I will do the backstay and the main sheet at the same time a lot. And like right as the puff is hitting, it'll be backstay on and main going out. That's going to be the most effective way to deal with a really big puff that hits in a hurry, assuming the Traveler's all the way down if or in the center. But if the Traveler's up high, then you got to dump the Traveler quick too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think jumping in the discussion to if the puff is coming, it depends also by the VMG that you want to sail. What we do with Claudia is you always start with the idea to do 50-50, no, if the puff is coming. So I have to ease the mainsail and she have to go a little bit higher while the puff is touching the boat. And of course, if the call is to do a higher mode, I stay with a little bit more main in, and she have to go a little bit higher to keep the heeling angle stable. Mm-hmm. Vice versa, if you are going in the fast mode, I say, okay, Claudia, don't change nothing. I'm going to manage the heeling angle with the mainsail sheet. So I'm easing more the mainsail and I try to go for speed. This is, I think, that is interesting to understand how to manage if a puff is coming and touch your boat. And about these three pictures, we were in Uruguay this winter, and the first one is interesting, Zeke, because it was the situation where we start in the light medium air, and then we finished the regatta with 18 knots. So we adjusted the more or less the tuning of the boat just to sail properly. And you can see that there are some faults. There is a little bit of backwind on the mainsail, but was a compromise between the steering, the mainsail shape, and the jib trim. So we adjust the halyard of the jib, we adjust the inauer, we adjust all the controls just to try to sail properly and however with the correct heeling angle. But yes, as you can see the fold close to the bottom part of the mainsail. And this is the condition where you want also put more canning on just to work more with the backstay, And if you see the backstay was the condition where it's really hard to trim because if you see the blocks start to be really low.
Right.
And the other photos is this. I put the second one because it was a moment where we were crossing another boat. So with Claudia, one of the calls was go for speed because you have to close the door, because the call of Michele was go straight. So we try to avoid a leave-out tack of the other boats. And the third one, and then it's your turn. The last photos is, I think, another interesting photos to understand how to play with the VMG during the upwind. We were close to the left ley line. It was windy, and we were one of the boat more on the left on the race course. So the goal was to go fast and close, to close and put in the best places, tactical place. So the call was go for speed, and again you have to change a little bit the compromise between the way of steer the boat and the way to set the mainsail.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of really good points on how many variables there are and how many decisions you got to make as the main trimmer, and trying to execute the game plan strategically, how to put the boat. But I think in this real windy stuff in terms of the setup, a big thing that I start thinking about, we've talked a lot about the backstay and the rig tune a little bit and adjusting for puffs, but I'm always curious about the weight placement, because I think generally speaking, the J70 really likes to have weight far forward. And for you guys sail with 5, I'm used to sailing with 4, so there's going to be some big variables there. But in terms of in this big breeze, when to start moving the weight back, I think is a pretty difficult choice to make. And, for sure it's really dependent on the waves, but I like to have somebody that's in charge of that on the boat. So I definitely have some say on it, but the forwardmost person kind of drives the bus for us on when it's time to start scooting back. And when I have to start straddling the winch, unfortunately, or sitting behind the winch and get really uncomfortable. But I just, don't forget how big of a tuning element your weight positioning is, and where your bow knuckle is slamming into the waves. And do you have any tells that tell you when it's time to really scoot back?
It's difficult to say. I'm the guys involved in that on board, and I am the guys that call the weight back or the weight forward. I really like to move it in the different conditions. As you can see in the picture, I'm behind the winch, and also Michele, the tactician, is really close to the winch too. So we are quite way back on the rail. In my opinion. Also, the girls, we sail in 5. So in the light twin spot, the girls, the bowman, Rossella, sail close to the mast. And when it become windy, start to move back and back and back. And this really, I think that play with the crew weight, it's really, really important to manage how to sail the boat.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree with you more. So before we move on, we had a couple questions that I want to just throw at you guys. They don't need to be long, elaborate answers, but I think it's important. So one of the questions was, when it's windy, obviously how the jib interacts with the main is important, especially when it comes to the in-hauler. So, Zeke or Giulio, either of you can start off. We'll have Zeke start off. So what is your discussion with the jib trimmer on when they need to release the in-hauler, where you like to set the in-hauler, and how you kind of make the decision of keeping the main, from not blowing up because of the in-hauler?
Yeah, well, the amount of in-hauler you can carry for sure depends a little bit on which jib you're using. But I like to carry in-hauler for as long as we can. And we pretty much set it at a point, when it's really windy, we set it at a point where it's in the cleat. The weather sheet is in the cleat at a point that it's taut on the clew, but it's not really pulling the clew to windward. And then the jib trimmer and the bow person will be pulling it from the block on the weather side of the boat. So they'll have to sit there with it up in their arm for a bit, for a lot of it, when we have the in-hauler on. And which talk about needing to be strong. But that way they can be playing it, because I think if the boat gets flat and you can pull the main really hard, you can pull the in-hauler on and get that depth in the bottom, and that really helps the boat go. But then they can dump it if a big puff comes. The reason that's really important to do is because if you don't blow the in-hauler and a puff comes on, you ease the main, and now the main is eased down to the point where it's in the slot, the gap between the leech of the jib and the belly of the main, and the main's going to blow up a lot faster. It's going to start luffing a lot more, and it's going to really unbalance the boat, because the jib is going to be pulling the bow down, telling the bow to turn downwind at the same time that the boat's heeling to leeward. And it makes the boat really difficult to sail and really, really unbalanced. So it's important that the jib goes out with the main at that point, just to the point where the in-hauler's no longer on. The other important thing there is that if the in-hauler stays really tight, the tighter your in-hauler is, the more headstay sag you're going to put into the boat. And there's nothing worse than seeing a boat going upwind with the main flogging, heeled over, full jib from the in-hauler on, and a bunch of headstay sag. It's just the exact opposite way to sail upwind efficiently. So being able to control the in-hauler to the point where it's on as much as those guys can pull it on through the block, and then they can dump it in a hurry to go to zero in-hauler, is really important. And if we're overstood on a ley line, that's the first thing to go, is the in-hauler is going to go off, so we can ease the main out, and we can put the bow down easy.
Well, thanks. I mean, we've as you see, we've gone to the next slide. We've already crossed the 1 hour barrier here. You guys are machines when it comes to giving out info. So one of the things I wanted to do, next week, we're having a talk on downwind sailing on J70 Monday with Tim Healy and Rory. And what I wanted to get from you guys, though, as the main trimmer, what are 1 to 2 points, I want this to be really quick, that you guys focus on? It could be planing, it could be the wing on wing mode, it could be displacement mode, but just 1 or 2 things that you work on when it comes to just trimming the main, not necessarily crew positioning or dynamics or anything like that, just mainsail trim. What are 2 points, quick points, that you guys focus on? So we'll have Giulio go, and then Zeke will go, and then we'll kind of wrap this thing up here a little bit.
Just really quickly, I think in the light to medium condition, I'm focused, the main is open. I'm really focused on the crew weight. So I try to work a lot with my body to roll the boat, and in the while adjust the mainsail. taking the mainsail from the block that is fixed on the main traveler, so I can manage all the excursion of the main. Speaking about the planning condition, first of all, have fun. And no, of course, I sailed with the main traveler all the way down. No vang. I control the leech just with the main sheet. And I'm really focused on the heeling angle. The communication in this case is basically between the Jenneker trimmer and the helmsman, and I jump inside the communication sometimes, if I can trim more the main or if I feel overpowered. So this is my 2 cents about the downwind.
Yeah, my 2 cents, and I'm going to try to beat you to be faster than that was, Giulio. But primary boat balancer, if it's light to moderate, I try to move a lot to help the boat stay on the correct heel angle and move my weight to help the boat go down waves if necessary. And then feedback on the mode. I'm the tactician downwind, so it's important we're achieving the correct modes, but it's really the driver and the trimmer who are doing the up ones, down ones to keep the boat on the right heel angle and in the right modes, but providing feedback is really important. So keep an eye on the big picture.
Awesome.
We received just a question about the downwind in the strong wind about the backstay, and yes, it's trimmed. It's the big difference between light, medium, and strong that you use the backstay in the downwind in the downwind in the strong wind condition. So backstay on.
Absolutely.
So we did have one question about does it matter if you guys use the F1 or the XCS2 main, how you're trimming it? I would say the short answer is no. The principles of trimming the main are still the same. It's just 2 different model sails and how you tune the rig. So what I did want to do is you guys did a great job. We all really appreciate the time that you 2 put into this. We did have a video to show, but due to some internet issues, we're not going to be able to show the video. So, again, we would just want to thank you 2 for doing this talk. These 2 are not giving themselves enough credit for how much time and effort they put into the J70 class. So if anyone out there has any questions, feel free to email Zeke or Giulio or myself. We're glad to answer all the questions, and we were glad to spend all this time with you guys today. Hope everyone's staying safe, and we hope that everyone will join us next Monday for the Downwind Sailing Talk. And looks like it's happy hour for a lot of people out there. So everyone go grab a drink and have a good night. And thank you guys again. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me, and thanks everybody that's here. We know we value your time being with us today, so thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks guys. Thank Alan, thanks Zeke, and thanks everybody. I've been I'm really happy to be with you this evening, and it's been a really nice talk. Thank you guys.
Thank you, everybody. Stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you next week.
Ciao.
Bye.